very good evening and welcome this edition of the Fourth Estate. Charles Mwangu Shampagi. And tonight we'll continue the debate on what is going on in this country, especially in terms of governance, and we're asking the question of governance in Uganda. Is it a constitutional or political question? 2 years ago, this week, the Supreme Court made a ruling in Amama Mbabazi versus the Electoral Commission and Yoweri Kaguta Museveni contesting the election of 2016, which was won by President Yoweri Museveni. Even when the Supreme Court gave the ruling in favor of President Museveni and the Electoral Commission, with Amama Mbabazi losing the petition, they gave out a number of guidelines of things that they needed done within 2 years, and we'll be checking how the government has responded to that, particularly the Attorney General. And we should also remember that that was the third election that ended up with a challenge in the Supreme Court. The first was, of course, 2001, 2006, and 2011 was settled on the streets of Kampala through what we saw as the walk to work. We have also seen a week of intense agitation, intense protest, especially over the arrest of members of parliament who were involved in the by-election for Arua municipality to replace the late Ibrahim Abiriga. Just last evening, for the panel and for our viewer, just last evening, a young lady, Rachel Atumza, I'll get the correct name, died at Victoria UMC Hospital in Bukoto. She was a victim of the violence on Monday. She was hit by what we've been told are stray bullets. Although the president questions how a bullet can go stray, he says a stray bullet is one that diverts and shoots a different person, not the intended one. But he says bullets shot in the air shouldn't be stray bullets. Rachel died yesterday. She was shot in the head, and nobody knew. Nobody could account. It's only her family that knew, and they've been trying to reach out. But the post-Abiriga, the Arua municipality by-election, from the count that we have, has so far claimed about 5 people. Was this called for? Members of Parliament Robert Sentamu Kyagulanyi remains incarcerated. We saw his images the other day. He was moved from the military court into the civilian court, together with members of Parliament Gerald Karhanga, Paul Mwiru, former Member of Parliament Mike Mabike, and the Member of Parliament elect for our municipality, Kasiano Wadri, and about 30 other people. To discuss all that cocktail of issues with me tonight, let me start with Dr. Kakungulu Mayambala. He is a lecturer of law at Makerere University Law School. Dr. Very nice to have you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Kakungulu Mayambala was one of the applicants under the amicus curiae application. They were invited as friends of court in that Amama Mbabazi versus the Electoral Commission and Yoweri Museveni in 2016. We also have with us the Minister of State in charge of urban planning
and housing.
Urban planning and housing. He's also Member of Parliament for Chinchizi East constituency in Kanungu district. Dr. Chris Bariomonsi. Very nice to have you, sir.
Thank you very much, and good evening, viewers.
We have from the Forum for Democratic Change its own president, commonly known as POA, Patrick Amuriat Oboy, or Patrick Oboy Amuriat.
Yes.
That's POA. Engineer, very nice to have you.
Thank you very much, Charles, for bringing me to the show. Good evening to you viewers out there.
And last but not least, my colleague, Onapito Ekomoloid. He is Legal and Corporate Affairs Director at Nile Breweries AB InBev.
Good evening, Charles, and good evening, viewers.
Let me start with you, Ona. We watch, as journalists, we watch the goings-on. This latest round appears to have had a specific target on journalists, but as recent as yesterday, the chiefs of defense forces, the CDF, the head of police, and the head of prisons were coming out to continue to condemn the conduct of soldiers, especially, and police were involved in quelling demonstrations and protests in Kampala, targeting journalists and beating them up. That's about what we cover. But your own perspective on the contestations as we have seen them over the last 2 weeks with what some people call a new kid on the block, Robert Sentamu Kyagulanyi, Bobi Wine.
Look, first of all, I think the attacks our friends, our fellow journalists were obviously unacceptable. I think they have been condemned across the spectrum by President Museveni and everyone else. But I'm not surprised that these attacks took place, because I think the security forces definitely knew what they were doing, as it has been exposed by the cameras, was wrong, and they did not want it to be seen. So the journalists became collateral damage. On the bigger issue of the contestation, I don't know exactly. The week, of course, just illuminated the political. To me, it's really the search for the country is grappling with how will it learn from its autopilot situation. I consider that Uganda is in autopilot politically, and the question is how will it learn? All these are like fights in the cockpit. Everyone is trying to say, where should this country go in the context of the changes that were brought in the constitution. I insist to remove the age limit. It opened a new chapter in Uganda's political discourse, because now nobody is clear how to end. I don't even think President Museveni seems to be clear how to end.
You mean President Museveni abandoned the controls a long time ago to put the plane in autopilot?
I don't think it's now within his controls.
And Paul and his group have failed to grab the controls. They are not co-piloting.
They don't even know where the
No,
controls are.
not quite. Actually, to the contrary, you know, our group has been in this trouble for quite a while. And, you know, this capital accumulates. We've been in this struggle for over 15 years now, and consistently doing that. And so what we see today is an increased awareness in the population. Every day that Mr. Museveni keeps in power, he gets more and more exposed. And I think we are about to get there. In my view, the distance we have covered in this struggle is more than the distance that we have got to cover in this struggle. And so as we go along, the struggle gains momentum.
Who is
more,
we?
more people get into the struggle.
Who is we?
The people
that
of
you're referring
Uganda,
to?
And what is the
the
struggle?
pro-democracy forces, those who see something wrong with what is happening in our country today.
Boy, you cannot be speaking.
And
you lead a political party. You cannot be speaking in generalities. You account for your leadership of the Forum for Democratic Change.
across the country, Charles, across the country, you need to know this.
I need to mention this. I was somewhere deep in Chamhunga, Bushenyi district, a couple of weeks ago, and a gentleman there said I was becoming a bit harder on the Forum for Democratic Change. But I will not back away from that.
Probably you are.
And
all the journalists in town seem to be, you know, targeting the Forum for Democratic Change today.
because you made
There's a
promises.
media war against the FDC.
No, you made promises you haven't been able to keep. And when you say the journey you have covered is longer than what you remain with covering, if people are looking at the FDC, they're saying, you guys made promises to us, but you don't seem to be leading us anywhere. Honors just told you, you probably don't even know where the controls are.
Well, Charles and viewers out there need to appreciate that we are about 10 million strong across the country.
FTC members?
Yes, about that. The next time I come here, I will be giving you the exact figures. But that is what we are. We control a big share of the body politic of this country, and we can never be ignored.
Who controls a bigger portion than you?
We have got an elaborate network,
Who controls a bigger portion than
both
you?
overt and covert, across the country.
But honestly, there was no evidence of that control in Bujiri. There was no evidence of that control in Arua municipality. The other day, there was no evidence of that control in the other municipalities that were elected for recently. There was no evidence
There
of
has
that
been
10
there
million.
has been this argument.
Just a moment. There was no evidence of that 10 million in the just concluded local council elections.
I have said here on this show before that for anybody to think that we had a local council election, they do not understand what went on during this election. That can never be the measure of strength of any political group in this country, for a number of reasons. One, what kind of election did we have? We had an election where there was evident bribery by Chris Barumuzi and his group. Two,
You bribed your people.
they went bribing. You know, what was this money that was released?
So your people are
What is
bribable.
this money that was released from the government treasury to villages? Number two, the registers were flawed. We didn't have
Okay.
a clear register. Number three, this thing of lying and intimidating the people of Uganda, especially villagers, impacted on the outcome of that election. So, elections per se, and you know, I am talking not only about
What impacted
Charles,
the performance of your candidate, Bruce Musema,
I am talking.
in Arua municipality?
Let me just
Yes.
finish this. Let me develop my points. I am talking not just about the LC1 election, but even the 2016 election, and by extension, what we expect in the 2021 election. I don't know whether we are going to have elections in 2021 that will be on the basis of a level playing ground. And if, in any case, Mr. Museveni was defeated, whether he would be so gracious to hand over power. These are the teething questions of the politics
Okay.
of this country.
In the interest of time, I will not dwell on that so much because I would have been interested to ask you. No, I was actually asked to ask you when you made changes in Parliament, whether you had now come around to believing in an opposition in Parliament when you have a people's government on the outside, because you had been vehemently opposed to naming a leadership in Parliament when you had a people's government outside the Parliament. We'll discuss that on another occasion.
right.
Hopefully we'll find time to get into that. Just one more before I go to gentlemen, Dr. Bariomus and Dr. Kakungulu Mayambala. Do you think this boils down to a constitutional or political question for this country?
I think it's both, really, in my view. In that, you see how the Constitution has been adulterated in order to advance the aspiration of a single person, Mr. Museveni. I was in the 7th Parliament when, you know, with great pain, I recognized that our Constitution was being messed up. You remember the unpopular 5 million bribe given to MPs in order to remove term limits? Yesterday we saw the Constitution under attack again, where even the military advanced on members of Parliament, beat them up, took some of them to prison. A number ended in hospitals. Some are sick even as we speak now. And the court the other day said, well, it was okay for the military to invade Parliament. And you wonder where this country is going.
Okay.
So in terms of the Constitution, it has been turned into just a piece of paper.
Okay.
In terms of the politics, you know, there is nobody who recognizes that there are dissenting voices in this country. Yesterday, the army came into the streets of Kampala, beating up people, including journalists that you've talked about. You are an endangered species. If you didn't know this, somebody can come and pull you out of this studio and they will get away with it. That is the extent of intolerance that we have got to in this country, and it's affecting not only political players, but journalists like you who go about doing their duty and have stopped doing their duty effectively.
Let me come to Dr. Bariomonse. You are in government.
Yes.
The NRM government gave us this constitution and electoral politics. Not that there were no electoral politics before, because just before heading into the tall bushes of Luwero, there was an election which was disputed in 1980, December 10th, 1980, that forced President Museveni, or President Museveni used it as an excuse to wage the 5-year Bush war. You reintroduce, after winning the Bush struggle in 1986, there is a reintroduction of elective politics, first with local councils, which were called resistance councils, to expanding the National Resistance Council, the NRC, in 1987, and then to regular elections from 1996. No, the Constituent Assembly 1994, and then 1996 periodic elections to this day. But Ugandans watching events, especially the fallout from the Arua municipality by-election, and by extension other elections we have held, especially Bujiri, Jinja East, that have had a bit of controversy. Ugandans are wondering whether NRM is actually still in charge of a constitutionalization agenda and in charge of a democratization agenda, given what we're seeing on the streets of Kampala today.
Yes, thank you very much, Charles. When you say
country wide, sorry.
Yes.
Not just
when you say Ugandans, you say some Ugandans, because you are putting us all together that we are wondering. First of all, it's good you have given that background, and also for purposes of historical record, that from independence, 1962 to 1986, those were 24 years, we only had elections twice in that period of 24 years. But I'm sure you and I agree that now we have gone on a constitutional path where elections are predictable. My friend here is saying he's not sure whether 2021 there will be elections. I want to confirm to you there will be elections in the 2021 and the 2026, and they have every 5 years. First of all, there is no crisis. We are on a constitutional path. What has happened is that we started with a movement political system, and in 2005 we changed to multi-party dispensation. You recall we voted through a referendum and we made a decision as Ugandans to go into multi-party politics. And since then, the elections we have been having are based on political parties, and the political parties contest for power. And Ugandans are still satisfied with the manifesto and the ideological positioning of NRM. And my friend, engineer here, Amriat, and his team have not yet persuaded the Ugandans to vote them. So, but what has happened now in the recent past is that because they are now desperate, they see that through elections they are unable to defeat NRM. Because Ugandans appreciate what NRM is doing, there is now a crop of political leaders and activists who think they can use violence to topple government, they can use violence to access positions of elected offices, and as a government, we shall not tolerate that kind of violent approach. When you look at the recent
when you promise
yes.
intolerance,
yes.
Because when you say we shall not tolerate, you're actually
yes.
promising intolerance.
Intolerance to violence as a means of trying to achieve power.
We've
yes.
seen it play out. We've seen it play out whenever you have deployed this, with suspects appearing in court on clutches, or holding onto clutches. You're a medical doctor. Holding onto clutches. They can hardly sit by themselves because they've been tortured at the hands, or maybe what you would call that not tolerance to violence.
Okay.
And
yes.
the only evidence you have is to say a president's vehicle was stormed in Arua. There is a dispute over which vehicle was stormed because the images that have been circulating vary. Are people asking, you're saying your colleagues in the opposition are desperate, and they're saying, no, the NRM is actually desperate in spite of its numbers. It still has to insert its party chairman, who's also the president, in every single election. And that is why, because you can't draw a line between whether he goes, between when he goes as chairman of the NRM or when he goes as president of the country, And therefore, you have that kind of crisis like we had in Arua. At least 5 people have been confirmed dead, starting with Yasin Kauma, the driver to Robert Chagulanyi. The young lady Rachel I spoke about is the latest victim, but we have had a death in Mitiana. We've had death elsewhere. And where does that place you? You're the guys in charge.
Yes, that's the point I was making, that our friends in the opposition, I think, are finding it very difficult to win the hearts of Ugandans, to win through the electoral process. And they are resorting to violence. They think if you can be violent, you can easily win.
I'm just wondering who is more violent in this case. The examples I've just given you, the beatings were not being done by the opposition.
I am coming to that.
Were being done on the
when you look at what
generals.
happened in Bujiri, Jinja East, and evidence is there. Even Arua, you question who began this violence. Like say, let's go to Arua, for instance. You are taking the stoning of the president's vehicle as if it's a small thing, a light issue. And you are saying...
The president himself said that was not an issue.
No. What he said...
The president says...
No. What he said was that for him... No. For him, being attacked is not a problem as such because he is protected. He can defend himself. But his worry was those hooligans attacking innocent Ugandans who may not be as protected as the president. That's the point that he was making.
Mr. Minister, just a moment.
Yes.
Does it concern you, as a human being, as a minister serving in this government, that the people in government are downplaying the cold-blooded murder of a man who was seated behind a wheel of a vehicle, not at the scene of the incident? Nobody
is downplaying the murders. First of all, government has come up to say, we regret the deaths and the injuries which occurred. And the president has spoken and the government has spoken. Nobody is saying it is okay to torture an individual, it's okay to kill a person. But the point I was making was that...
specifically, the killing in Arua was, from what we are able to hear, because you have nobody in government has come up with even a preliminary investigation report that says this is how Yasin Kauma died. What we are hearing from sourcing is that he was literally executed at his will.
Well, I don't know what you're sourcing.
By a gun fired.
By who?
Believably, I mean, you would imagine by a member of the security forces, because the initial explanations were he was killed by a stray bullet. And the president has debunked the idea of stray bullets killing people on the ground. Says because stray bullets to one are supposed to be shot in the air, not aiming at people.
No, as far as I know, investigations are still being carried out. It is not yet very clear who killed that young man, Yasin. It's your own fabrication. That's a security officer from government. But I think officially...
No, government statements from government officials have said he was killed by a stray bullet.
No.
Yes.
I am also from government, by the way. You need to listen. We are saying investigations are being carried out. We do not know, as of now, what exactly happened, who exactly killed him. But I'm sure in the course of time, that will emerge, that will come out. So first of all, as a government, we have regulated the deaths and the injuries, and we do not condone torture in any way. It is true, some of our security officers were errant. They exceeded their powers by torturing like journalists and other people, and we condemn that. And we have assured the country that that will be investigated, and the officers who breached the law will definitely be brought to book. But also we must condemn the violence orchestrated by the opposition groups, like stoning a presidential vehicle. That is treasonable. You are saying we don't have evidence, but the evidence will be uncovered, and we wait for court for our people to show the evidence.
You're charging 34 people for stoning the vehicle of the convoy of the president, including 4 members of parliament.
Why do you think there's no evidence?
Court?
Yes.
You're charging
No.
Yes,
you wait.
34 people.
You wait when the proceedings start. Then our prosecutors will tell the evidence. If it is weak. No. If the evidence is weak.
I think that vehicle would have been crushed by the number of...
If the evidence is weak, he's a lawyer. If the evidence is weak, then the court will throw it out.
Just so this one before we take the break.
But the crisis where it is as I wind up, I think to me as NRM, we don't have any crisis and we don't have any big problem. The bigger crisis, my friend Engineer Amriat is not saying it here, is within the opposition ranks.
You know, Dr. Baryomo, I'm only surprised by one small thing.
Yes.
When you run a government, you run it for everybody. When you separate and say, for us in the movement, and then the others in the opposition, I don't know where I and on a Peter fall, and Dr. Kakungulu here fall in your characterization of them and us.
Yes.
You're in charge of the whole country. The young lady.
No, you're not
is,
getting me.
The young lady, Rachel Ayabazibu, I've just remembered her name. May her soul rest in peace. Doesn't belong to a political party. Was going to look after to find her academic papers. Was visiting relatives in Kampala to find academic papers, trying to get into the world and look for a job. And where does she belong? But just hold it. I need to come quickly to. No, I'll come back to you after.
Don't vulgarize the point that I was making, because I initially said we went into multi-party politics. So I'm saying this NRM as a ruling party versus the opposition.
Okay.
The opposition. And the bigger crisis is actually within Amuriat's family. He's not telling you, why did you lose Arua, why did you lose the Bujiri, and so forth.
We'll come
so
to that.
We'll explore that in a moment. But let me come to
that's
Dr.
where the
Kakungulu.
bigger problem is. And I sympathize with the engineer, actually.
It's not about
He has
losing
taken
or
over
winning
a crumbling
elections.
party.
No.
We'll come to that, Dr. Baryomo, we'll come to that in a moment.
Okay.
Let me quickly have Dr. Kakungulu Mayambala. You were amicus curiae. You were amicus curiae in the electoral petition of the 2016 elections. What is your audit 2 years down the road? Because that's the time frame that the Supreme Court gave to the Attorney General to respond to certain issues.
Yeah, we came in the presidential petition as amicus, and our intention was to have electoral reforms, and the Supreme Court agreed and made some recommendations, including use of oral evidence, increasing the time of filing of the presidential petitions, and in the context of the time of Arua and the other by-elections, issues of giving donations, use of civil servants, and generally the role of Parliament and executive in the bring about these reforms. But as we talk right now, the Chief Justice has written to the Attorney General asking him to brief the court about the developments which he has initiated, because today marked the 2 years from that time and within which the government was meant to bring these reforms. As you may remember, in the presidential age limit, some of these things were brought in, although in not an orderly manner, but some of the amendments were meant to be handled. But as we can see now, this law is being challenged in the court, so we don't know what its likely outcome is going to be. But at least the recommendations are still binding, and when you look at the last order of the court, it says that the Attorney General will brief the court within 2 years from the date of the judgment, the measures which will have been taken to implement these recommendations. And number 3, the court may thereafter make further orders and recommendations. I think tomorrow or in the week to come, the Chief Justice and Attorney General will review the situation and see what will be done or needs to be done.
Right on that point, we need to take a quick commercial break, and when we come, we'll continue the discussion of the governance in Uganda, a constitutional or political problem. We'll be right back. You're still watching The Fourth Estate, and we're discussing governance in Uganda, a constitutional or political problem. Different perspectives that we're seeing, but all guided by the events that we have seen over a broader stretch over the last 2 years since the Constitutional Court, the Supreme Court ruling rather, in that electoral petition filed by Mama Mbabazi, which is celebrating, is marking 2 years today. This response from the Attorney General. I've been told, Dr. Kakungulu, that the Attorney General was yet to respond to the Chief Justice on his inquiry, meaning possibly very little has been done or nothing has been done yet, or he's trying to compile what has been done. But we've also seen quite violent exchanges in Kampala and other towns since the Arua by-election. which has, I'm receiving information that a second victim of the Mityana shooting also passed on. That was part of the NTV news before we came into studio. So you're counting about 5 or 6 people have died since that election. And you're wondering if you're in a constitutional path or you have chosen an electoral path, why this death? Why the injuries? And who is responsible? Who can account for them? Because in Mityana, a policeman turned his gun on a moving taxi vehicle, shot into it, initially killed 1 person and then injured about 5 others. Now another one has died. So 4 injured, 2 dead, 2 casualties. Richard Bazibwe was not even part of any demonstration or protest of anything.
Even the taxi
yes.
people were going
yeah, they were going for Bikabi Abaganda football tournament. And they were killed. The gentleman in Arua who had just maybe driven somebody, short-term cheyo or conviction, and ends up dead. But someone is asking, I would like to say to Dr. Baryomonse that NRM should not hide behind FDC's failure to win in Bujiri and or Arua. NRM, with all the favors that come with incumbency, still lost those elections. Winners of those elections are opposition leaning, not NRM leaning. So NRM shouldn't deflect attention away from its failures in those constituencies. That's one view. I'll take a few more. I'll take a few more before we can come back to this discussion. Dr. Kiza Besigye is on record to say that elections will not cause change of leadership in this country. Can the FDC president explain why they still participate in those elections? FDC has lost all by-elections that POA has participated in as president of FDC. They have lost LC1 elections and women council elections. What exactly is the leadership of POA doing? This is a question from Apollo. Apollo, you need to be corrected. I think under POA, the FDC won in Rukonjiri.
And also Ginger.
And
Ginger Municipality.
And Ginger Municipality. East.
And actually, we are even contesting Nebi and Shema. You see?
Okay.
And also,
no, I'm just reading messages. You respond.
Yes, we are going to.
You respond. Let me first take some more messages. Bernard Impeiro from Lovaga is watching us and says, why is the president of FDC leaning on the whole country? Let him tell us what special thing his party has achieved under his leadership apart from being split into 2. Can he look into the camera and confirm to the viewers that he's still in charge when his 22 MPs have already defied him? That's Bernard Impeiro. Another viewer here says, yes, the sound people, that we're having a lot of echoes coming out to our viewers. Someone else was talking about Anapito's microphone, but I think that has been corrected. A viewer is just talking about that. I'm sure the technical people are dealing with that. Let me also take these messages. Yes, this was to bring me, which I just announced, the death of this other person from Mityana who was shot. Yes, also Nteja Simwe, thank you very much for this information. Nteja also asks, but you POA also, why did you deceive us that you'd remove Museveni from power in your first 100 days as FDC president? Honorable Baryomonse, when military police were beating up journalists, especially James Akena, on Monday, who was intolerant to the other? The army or that is Nteje Asimwe? Are raising those questions. Joseph Nwabine is watching us, I believe, from Kabola Liantonde. He says, POA, if you were to do a sincere stock-taking and self-examination, are you as opposition, particularly FDC, making a headway, or are you just cascading around one position? And after how many more decades do you see FDC presenting any other person as its presidential flag bearer apart from Besigye? There are many questions. You respond.
I was not heard apparently. First segment, so let my voice be.
Now they have heard you.
After listening to the normal, panelists, the MPs, the leader of the FDC, to me, I repeat my point that I think the country is in denial, politically. That's my real sincere belief. On both sides. The opposition is in denial, despite acknowledging that they cannot electorally remove President Museveni. They continue to go through this circus, which only leads to death and further splits among themselves. On the other hand, The NRM is in denial that after this long of President Museveni, and given that he cannot be defeated in elections, there isn't enough frustration by those who oppose the president. So there is a need for the country to, how do you bridge that gap? A group that is frustrated because it feels it cannot have a fair shake in terms of getting power, and then really both the political pipeline is blocked. So, and the country is the ultimate loser, because the president and everyone is admitting there is a massive unemployment among the youth. That's why Bobi Wine is getting a platform. So how do you solve this problem in that stalemate? Get the country still moving and give hope to those who feel they have no chance so long as President Museveni is there. And I don't think their need for chance is about necessarily someone also being in power, but getting the country working for them as well.
Can we start with getting answers from Dr. Kakungulu?
Yeah.
You'd give us a perspective as a non-political player to Honor's dilemma, which is a dilemma for many, really.
Yeah, I think what needs to be done is we need to, one, move away from the one-party system to a multi-party dispensation.
I thought we've been having a multi-party dispensation since
for the last 15 years,
yes.
But still the one-party rule.
Do you live in Uganda?
Yes, the Ugandans are yet to come out of it. Then the politics, you see the view that these political forces can play in the market in a free and democratic framework is also not well underscored on both the ruling party and also the mainstream opposition. So there is need to reconcile those views, and also we need to get back to the Supreme Court ruling in the recent presidential petition and bring comprehensive as opposed to piecemeal electoral reforms that are going to make the country return from a political to a constitutional path during the election. So there is really need for that to streamline the legal system so that we come back to normal political rule. Otherwise, as of now, there is a lot of contestations and elections have become a do or die, which is leading to all this unnecessary loss of lives.
Dr. Kakungulu, if I could just stay with you for a moment. The people who argue that hardly after 20 years of implementing a constitution from 1995 to date, that Power said the constitution has been turned around so much that you can no longer recognize the document itself. It's no longer the aspirations that the Docu Commission picked up. There are people who think you're saying have comprehensive reform. Government has been toying with the idea of setting up another constitutional review commission.
Yes.
We had a constitutional review commission in 2000. It was announced in the 2001.
2006.
Yes, 2001, and then delivered its verdict before the 2006 elections, the ones that opened up the space for political parties to participate. It has gone through so many amendments already. Do you think this country needs a completely new constitutional order, or the constitution as it exists today can actually be still amended?
The constitutional amendments have come in such a way that, like I've already observed, they've not been coordinated. They've been piecemeal. And I will give you, like, recently in the Constitutional Court, they talked about the base structure doctrine. So you find that the Constitution initially it had term limits, it had age limit, and some of these things have been removed. So what you have now, as the party president has already observed of the FDC, is that you have a constitution which, for example, Article 98, it gives the president power not to be tried as long as he's a sitting president for criminal or civil matters. But that article was inserted there, taking care of the fact that the president had 2 term limits, which are no longer there now. So right now, you may never try the president probably forever, because now if he has been in power for 32 years, you cannot try him,
He
and
can be around
still
for the
is still
next,
going on.
yes.
So you find that
Another
this
20.
the basic structure has been destroyed, because when they were putting 98, they had that one on age limit and also 2 terms. So they thought that after the 2 terms, then this person would be out. So all these are kind of contradictions which are within. So for example, so the view that the president enjoys the privileges even when campaigning. You asked about the Arua situation, whether it's there as President of the Republic of Uganda or NRM party chairperson. Of course, it's the President of the Republic. So is also the President of the biggest political party, the ruling biggest political party. But the thing is that if the age limit, the term limits were there, a president would ever benefit from such a privilege or an honor only once, because the first election you would not be a president. Then only when you are running, seeking your second and last term, would you benefit. But as of now, you can benefit endlessly, and so that's what has been distorted.
As long as people vote you,
yes,
you should add that.
Yeah.
Can I come in?
Yeah, sure, you can.
Yes.
I know that you said you are in those discussion spaces where they're discussing. This Constitutional Review Commission, is it coming anytime soon? And why didn't it come earlier?
Yes, first of all,
partly because of that.
Let me say that we take the Supreme Court recommendations seriously as a government, and some of them have been addressed through what is popularly known as the emergency bill, the constitutional amendment, which was spearheaded by Honorable Rafael Magezi, although the discussion focused on the age limit, but there were other ingredients in that bill, including presidential elections. And if you are petitioning a court, how long should the court take, the petition, so all those were considered, and we made very progressive readjustments, which are now part of the law, subject to what the Supreme Court will rule, because there was an appeal. So that has been addressed. Secondly,
those that were smuggled in?
No. They were in the parent bill. They were in the parent bill. The problem is some of you didn't read the bill. You only focused on the age limit issue. Secondly, as we have said before, there is a process which will culminate into appointment of a Constitutional Review Commission, which will look at all these issues. So there is no crisis. We are moving, and I'm sure the Attorney General will be able to respond to the letter by the Chief Justice.
I can suspect how the Attorney General will respond. He will announce the members of the new of the Constitutional Review Committee, the Constitutional Review team, commission, and then write back to the Supreme Court and say, Chief Justice? Write back to the Chief Justice and say, you asked for this, I have put up a committee.
There are recommendations which probably require bills, not necessarily the Constitution, and he will report on the work being done within the ministry, because coming up with a bill, you don't just wake up and say there is a bill here. There is a consultative process which starts before you present the bill to Parliament. So the Attorney General will respond. But I also wanted to respond and comment on some of the issues raised by my colleagues.
And some of the viewers.
Yes. Honorable Pito said the political pipeline is blocked. How can you say that if you are living in Uganda? We just had elections in 2016 where Uganda is decided at the level of the president, parliamentary, district level, sub-county level. Recently we had LC elections in all villages of Uganda where Ugandans participated by lining up. I know because my good friend, Engineer Amuriat, his party could not even field candidates.
How credible these
just wait.
Are.
His party could not field in over 50% of the LOCs could not field the candidates. And he performed very poorly.
You have that
now
record?
Yes, I have. And now you are here lamenting. We had women council elections which just ended just recently. You should tell the country, look in the camera and tell the country, how did you perform in the women council elections? So if you want to read the political pulse in the country, just look at LC elections, look at women council elections, and go back even to 2016. And 2021, we shall have elections. So when you say the political pipeline is blocked, I don't know what you mean.
Of course, do you want me to explain?
No, you don't have to. You don't have to.
Because you know
So-
what I mean.
So, like I said earlier on, we have a constitutional order. Elections are predictable. Like we had them in 2016, we shall have them in 2021. So whoever wants to be president, whoever wants to be a member of parliament should prepare, mobilize the population, and wait for that election. And the advice I would give my friends is that the violence will not take you anywhere. If I were you, Power, as the head of FDC, I would put my energy on selling my ideology to Ugandans. Maybe by 2021, people will have understood what you stand for as FDC. But as you stand now, that's why I was saying the crisis is bigger within the FDC and the entire opposition than it is in NRM.
Dr. Wariomo, sir.
How many people have you heard defecting from NRM because of the constitutional amendments or this fracas which is there? Instead, you see the glaring fracture within the FDC. When Engineer Amuriat appointed a new team in Parliament, you saw the backlash. Actually, he has a crisis. You have been helped by this Arua thing to mask that confusion. But you have a very huge crisis where your own members of Parliament actually want to publicly, if anything, like you reject and remove themselves from
Thank
the
you.
establishment.
Amriat will respond to some of those issues. And because there is a viewer who also asks you,
But as we look at
ask
the
you to look
deaths,
into the
first
camera.
of all, we really condole with the families that have lost their dear ones and really regret those deaths. They were not necessary. But as we look into this Arua thing, in Christianity, there's what we call the original sin. Like if you trace back to Arua, where did the problem come from? The problem came from the violent hooligans who were supporting some candidates, causing the violence. And then you have a spiral effect arising into all this. Then also the misuse of social media. Like somebody who put on social media that the Honorable Zake had died. That's what resulted into riots in Mityana. When actually it was not true, and then people have died.
I thought you had effectively managed social media when you put a tax on it. But
The tax is manageable. The tax is manageable by
Dr. Wariomo, I'd like to. It's sometimes surprising to me that a group that came in through the grossest of violence methods preaches non-violence today with the passion that you do. And I would recommend that you read that dissertation on Franz Fanon's theory of violence and how it was practical, put into practical use in an East African country. I think that's the title. I don't remember the title very well. Authored by somebody called Y. Museveni in 1969.
I know I've read this.
Yes, I think you might need to read it.
So are you recommending that we come on this talk show and tell Ugandans to get violent?
No.
Yes,
No. I'm saying the way with which, because you hold power now, how you treat other people who challenge your hold on to power if they use methods that have worked for you as a government in power. They have worked for you before, and you don't think other people should use them because you think now it's wrong.
No.
I think, Charles, I think, Charles, we need to be reminded
Yes.
of our history. We have had elections under Museveni.
Engineer
From 1996.
Engineer Amriat.
If I can respond to what...
Before you remind us of our history.
Let me just,
before you remind us of our history.
develop my point.
Just before you remind us of our
Put the
history.
challenge to me,
Can
which
you
I
look?
didn't
Can you look into the camera?
Right.
And
I will
respond.
look straight into
Yes,
the
and
camera.
respond to the challenge put to you by Dr. Wariomo and one of our viewers.
Before I respond to that, I would like viewers to appreciate where we are coming from as a country. Violence. 1996 election. We saw it. Who were the masters of violence? The NRM.
Where?
In 2001, there was even a paramilitary arrangement headed by Kakoza Mutale that went around this country beating who didn't care to listen to the gospel of the NRM. It happened. This went on to the year 2006 elections, 2011, and to a certain extent, even in the last election, where military generals went around the country. They were assigned constituencies I don't understand what my brother Chris is talking about. Who has the capacity to make violence on the population?
Talk about
Is it those who are unarmed
armed with stones and
or
fires.
those who are armed? You know, you remind me about La Pena, where people carrying stones imagined they could challenge gunmen. I think in this era, that is not the thinking that we have. FDC believes in non-violent struggle. Sure. And just to answer one of the viewers who kept asking why we are in elections. And that, you know, we've kept losing elections. First of all, just put the record straight. Since I became president, we've won in 2 elections that were quite, you know, competitive. The one in Jinja Municipality East and the one in Rukunjiri. We won convincingly. But why does FDC go into an election? We go to an election for a number of reasons. One, it is tactical engagement in our strategy to empower the people to engage in non-violent struggle. And this is why we can even dare go to the NRM or UPC background in a patch, in Kotido. And by the way, even in areas where we have lost in the bigger election that everybody seems to be focusing attention to. Member of Parliament, we have made gains at the lower council elections. Those are achievements.
You're giving excuses.
But we've also passed our message to the people.
Engineer Amriat, you're giving excuses.
No, Charles,
struggling painfully.
No. I would like to make this clear to everyone.
You can't get Nile fish, you settle for men.
Well, omena is also fish, you know.
No, you're harvesting
it
it
can
from
The fish you got the tadpoles.
For us, elections are short-term gains.
Engineer Amriat.
What we are looking for is long-term gains.
Engineer
Because we
Amriat,
are the struggle,
your former president,
doesn't matter.
Your
Yes?
former president, Dr. Kiza Besigye, has called it Mugongowazi. The fish has been eaten. You're collecting bones.
No,
Yes.
not quite. That is really undermining, you know, leadership at lower levels. I think, you know, under our laws, we recognize those positions as important in democracy.
Dr. Bariomus
and in
challenged
the
you here and said you were hardly
this?
present in those lower positions. You had
Why?
Even look at the 9th
Why-
Parliament
why?
and
Why?
transitioning with the 10th.
Why?
They lost about half of the members of Parliament. How did they perform?
No. I think that is wrong.
What is your strength in the
And
Parliament?
even looking at, you know, judging our strength out there on the basis of members of Parliament is erroneous.
Okay.
Because in 2016, even if we accepted the 38% that you allocated us, because it was an allocation, we know we won 2016 by 52.8%, and we have the evidence that you stopped us bringing to court. You did.
I am willing to pay
You-
for you,
you
to
did.
publish that evidence.
No.
in the new
Of
vision.
what value is it going to be?
No. You
Of
keep
what?
saying,
Of, at this
I will
point,
pay for you the
no,
page you display. The
Chris,
polling stations where you won. And where you
Chris,
lost the whole country. Then you count.
at this point of what value is that going to be?
To persuade Uganda that you
apart
won.
from being academic,
No.
is it going
Because
to? Is it going
the
to
Electoral
remove?
Commission
No.
published all their results. They are there. I want you to publish yours, which
We
shows
can
you
take
got
it to
52.
court.
Don't put in the
If the
papers.
process is
Put in the
allowed,
new vision. I will pay for you.
you know, and that is the discussion we want to engage in with you, who stole the election. We want to bring our evidence on the table.
You want to discuss with the thief?
Discuss him out of power.
But if you can be,
Discuss the thief out of power.
if you
And
can
you know,
repeatedly be stolen, then why should Ugandans trust you with their vote.
Charles, can you guide this discussion? Can you guide this discussion?
Okay, please.
If
The
you can
election-
repeatedly be stolen.
Dr.
You know what I'm
Mariam,
saying? If your vote can repeatedly be stolen over 4 times, so why should Ugandans trust you?
Dr.
Then they should
Kakungulu
abandon
talked
you.
about the change of the constitution, what the basic structure that was raised in Mbale. But we'll come back to that.
Can I just
Can you
finish
just conclude
this?
your submission?
And look straight in the camera as I answer this. A rebellion within Parliament. I think as a leadership, we are still on top of things. We are in a discussion with our members of Parliament. I would like to impress upon them that it's not about the position that you hold in Parliament. It's about all of us contributing to the struggle. Because many of our members out there hold no position, but they contribute towards the building blocks of the struggle. And I think that is what is paramount. I do believe that we will be talking to these members of Parliament, 22 or so in number, to agree that really the positions in the House are bigger than, are smaller than, what we seek to do for the population of Uganda.
You didn't
In
purge
us-
those you disagreed with, or those who
I
disagreed
think the
with you?
problem was that they see it as a purge. You purged them.
Not at all.
Yes.
If it was a purge, it would have come immediately after I got into the presidency. If it was a purge, you would not see anybody who didn't support me in the election appearing in the lineup of members. I can name them. There are a number of them.
But there are those who had clear timelines when they would be.
That is a matter of law again. It's something that we can argue with the Speaker of Parliament. The issues have come up about that timing, and we have the law. Fortunately, we're on the right side of the law.
Are you
In as
sure?
far as, yes, in as far as this is
Why
concerned.
haven't you
and,
repressed
and we are going to prove this.
We need to take a quick
Um,
break. We
can
need
I
to take-
just- can I
yes,
just-
if you could just conclude also.
Can I
as-
just conclude?
Yes, if you could conclude also with this. You were vehemently opposed to the naming of a shadow cabinet before you became president of FDC.
Again, we have over the years explained ourselves. And I just want to give an example where a person who wins the presidential elections does not have the majority in Parliament. That minority that that person has, just assume that the Right Honorable Amama Mbabazi won in the presidential elections in 2016 and just had a handful of members of Parliament. That handful cannot be opposition because they are in government. And therefore, in democracies all over the world, that would be referred as a minority by virtue of their number. This is what we are advocating for. And we shall continue to push for an amendment of the Constitution to change the status quo. For now,
They are saying we shouldn't touch the constitution.
for now, no. when the amendments are necessary.
Okay.
Yours are just amendments done for one
I think I've
personality.
responded,
When
or
it's-
Engineer Amriat. I'm afraid we need to take a break. I'll just take one question for Dr. Kakungulu. A viewer here is saying the trial, yes, this is a message sent earlier. The trial against Bobby Wine is a trial against the citizens. I think he was responding to Dr. Variomonsi, but says to Dr. Kakungulu, Article 70 allows both movement political system to operate alongside multi-party political system. How can the two operate? And don't you think this is what gives this animal called NRA, NRM, or conduct itself in this manner? If you could give a quick answer to that, and
Yes,
then
I
we'll take a
think
break.
The NRM is, as of now, is a political party organization. And we have other political party organizations which are competing. So historically, because the NRM has been in power for now 32 years, so it has the issue of incumbents, which again was addressed in the in our amicus brief. And one of the issues which was addressed was that one of the recommendations which was made by the court is that the issue of incumbents has to be looked at and reviewed in terms of the law and the enjoyment of the privileges, including media coverage. So, for example, the attention which the candidate gets as the NRM candidate or as sitting president, all those, the media coverage, the issue of resources, donation is, when you are making a donation, can you tell the president not to make any more donations because it's still campaigning time? Because he's still the president, he's not only NRM candidate. Then issue of civil servants.
The point you just made,
Yes.
can you tell?
You saw
Can you tell the presidential?
Miss Musisi.
Yes. The man who the people who came after Onapito, because as presidential press secretary.
Yes.
Can you tell the presidential press secretary not to tweet when a party chairman has been stoned campaigning for a party candidate, separating that from the presidency? We need to take a break.
But actually, the president, in this case, President Yoweri Museveni, once he's nominated as a candidate, he doesn't usually give donations. He behaves as a candidate up to the end.
We will check on that. We need subject to that to check.
With billions of public funds.
Gentlemen, we're taking a break.
Which date?
We're taking a break. Let me take a message from someone says it's very troubling for Dr. Baryomonsi to attempt to justify the extrajudicial killing of Ugandans under the excuse of original sin. That is even in question. Even if crimes have been committed, the security forces have a duty to de-escalate situations and follow the rule of law in bringing suspects of crimes to book. There can never be a justification for torturing people. One day these violations will be investigated and perpetrators will be brought to book. That's from Anthony
But
Maseki.
I did not justify the death. I said we did trace from where did it start from. The violence in Arua. Who started
But I think what
Okay.
what the gentleman is saying is, you know, torture as a method of
No, we all condemn it.
extracting information
We
is
all-
wrong. I mean, it's...
I'm wondering about, we'll discuss the military because
Yes.
it was one of the issues that came up in the
Yes,
Supreme
yes,
Court.
yes.
So can we spare the military?
I didn't condone the torture. I didn't condone the death. I said,
can we,
where did it come
that is
from?
a failure
Yes,
on
we-
the-
we
on the
have
part
one
of
segment.
your system.
You do.
And you should
Gentlemen,
admit,
gentlemen, we have
should
one segment to
apologize
end the
to
show,
Ugandans.
and we will spend the last segment on the conduct of the military in dealing with these political protests. After a very short commercial break, we'll be right back. You're still watching The Fourth Estate. Jagi and Semakula, thank you for your feedback. You're watching the show, and also JJ Opondo of the Ghana People's Congress. Thank you very much. I received your message, as well as the other viewers. You can see that the discussion is going on online, especially. So we'll continue it on Facebook and on Twitter, and of course on WhatsApp groups. Gentlemen, I'd like to focus for this last segment specifically on the conduct of security forces, especially in the last few days. The conduct of security forces has plagued our our electoral democracy since we started having elections, especially the regular elections that we talked about at the beginning. You can trace it back to the Ndahora shooting, Ndahora in Rukunjiri, 2001. It was never resolved. There was a soldier who drove a pickup truck into supporters, I think, of Dr. Kiza Besigye in Boyogere, killing about 6 people. I think that was also the 2001 elections, the hotly contested 2001 elections. You have seen death following every attempt at holding elections. And the question that comes up, if guns cannot give way to the ballot, then what are we talking about in terms of constitutionalizing and democratizing this country? But the Supreme Court had a specific recommendation. So I want to start with you, Dr. Kakungulu Mayambala, on the Supreme Court finding and recommendation.
Yeah, the Supreme Court finding and recommendation on security is that the security apparatus should be used as a way of promoting democracy. And in particular, we have to note that the police, the military, and the other security agencies are all constitutional establishments. But also under the Constitution, these security agencies are required to observe human rights in the conduct of their work. So they are meant to be trained and they observe these human rights. But of course, over time, there has been new challenges. One of the recommendations was that the law should regulate the use of technology in elections. And the social media has become a new situation. When the police is deploying, they may be deploying thinking that they are going to handle a situation which is not very aggressive. Then somebody will saturate something on the social media, and then the people, like we saw in Mitiana, the situation gets tensed up. Otherwise, the security forces, according to the court, should follow the law and should observe human rights in the conduct or in carrying out their duties.
Do you find a contradiction, Dr. Kakungulu, on the two decisions, the one by the Supreme Court in this
John Patrick
Amama Mbabazi versus the Electoral Commission and Yoweri Museveni, and the decision by the Constitutional Court in the recent challenge to the amendment of Article 1052?
Yes, slightly, yes.
Or especially on security, on the role of
Yes,
security, because
slightly.
the Constitutional Court judges dealt with, had an issue to do with the raid on Parliament by an outfit of security personnel.
Yeah, in the recent decision of the the Constitutional Court, the court held that these security forces they did the right thing in invading Parliament and trying to restore calm. But of course, in that situation, I think there was a bit of excessive use of force. And again, when it comes back to the constitutional requirement that even in executing their work, they should observe human rights. Because like we saw this week, civilians are leaving a building, they put their hands up, and you see a military officer or a journalist is on the ground, and then the military officer is still beating such a person who is really not resisting or in any way not causing any kind of threat. And even the Uganda Human Rights Commission has issued statements about excessive use of force by the security forces. So yes, their role is important because they are the ones who will restore calm and order in the event of these situations, but they should act with restraint and use reasonable force as is required.
Dr. Williams, let me come to you.
But I think just before the politicians come in, I just wanted to me, the actions of the army, which some people are surprised about, are not surprising. And I think they just illustrate that we are living a political lie. And I think Uganda's past has caught up with us. People are trying to pretend that the Yoweri Museveni, who swore on the steps of Parliament in 1986, purely on the strengths of the army, that was actually literally standing behind him, is now having different power to be in office from the power he had then. But it hasn't. So I think the army actually also offers Uganda a way out of its impasse politically. That how do we, those who feel they are tired with Yoweri Museveni winning elections and they cannot defeat him, how do you keep him out of elections and still he enjoys the power that he enjoyed in 1986, which nothing has reduced from. I think other parts of the world have done this. You have I think the Iranians have a supreme leader of some sort. I think basically the Chinese also have that.
So
Their president who is also become a life president. I mean, we
asking,
want to pretend that certain things are not what they are. But we all know that they are.
You asked Dr. Bariomonse and his colleagues at Plot 10 Chadondo Road,
Yes.
or when they got caucus at, I think,
in Entebbe State House.
In State House, when they are going to crown President Yoweri Museveni as the dear leader and stop this pretense about elections.
Look, today,
is that what you're trying to
the
say?
president was visibly frustrated with the Electoral Commission. I said he's going to get rid of them. I think naturally, the fatigue of elections, he shouldn't be going through it, in my view. You know, we need the doctor here, and I mean the real constitutional amendment we need.
That is why the 72 years, 70,
from a break
65 years
of elections that we all know are not what they are.
Dr. Bariomonse, as you come in to comment,
yes.
if the bullet has refused to leave the space for the ballot, how does the country move forward?
That assertion, first of all, is wrong, because you can't, for instance, say I became a member of parliament for Chinchizi East because of the bullet. No. The people in my constituency voted, I had competitors, and I got the majority. Leaders are being elected.
The military is acting,
Yes.
the military is acting like the country is holding an election when it's at war.
Not really.
When it's not.
All of us live in Uganda.
Yes.
By and large, elections in Uganda are peaceful. And all of us adults, we've been participating in these elections. Although in some few instances, you get some errant security officers. And we have internal mechanisms, both within the army, the police, to discipline these officers. Others are also arraigned before the courts of law, depending on the gravity
What
of
is
the-
an errant?
of-
What is an errant officer when he's deployed either with a stick and or with an automatic weapon?
No, like
Because there is a demonstration in Kampala,
yes.
you deploy officers with war arms to deal with unarmed civilians. Now, recently, you've been giving them sticks to boot.
So you want us to give them stones?
No, you're giving
Yes.
them ammunition, war,
Yes, first of all, they
no,
are-
war grade weaponry
Yes.
to deal with unarmed people on the streets.
I think,
And
And that's what
Charles,
is causing the death. The
Yes, and
killings.
the security officers are trained to know when to use the guns and those weapons and when not. You'd also need to remember that a few years back, a police officer called Ariong was stoned to death during those riots here in Kampala, in this town here. And therefore, as you judge these security officers, you need to put that in the back of our mind. We are not saying that security officers should harass the population like they did the journalists and other innocent people. That's why I was saying some errant security officers sometimes cross the line and break the law.
And what I'm
And the
trying,
assurance
and
we are
what I'm
giving the
trying to put
country-
to you, Dr. Baryomunsi, is that those are not errant security officers. They are actually executing how they have been deployed. Because you cannot have...
Nobody-
no, I can
yes.
show you a video here, or you must have seen the images. 5-6 security officers carrying a gun and sticks. Now, you can't say that the one who was working at Akena, there were 3 of them at the same time. That one of them was errant and the others were not errant.
So if you go
all of
into
them were errant.
proportions, those 3 officers, they were out of how many? Are you saying every security officer who was in the town was beating people?
Majority of those we saw.
No.
Yes.
No.
Charles,
That's why I said that some few errant officers, like I saw the footage where they were beating a journalist, it was at the called for, and I am sure that the officer will have to answer for that because somebody is not armed, he puts his hands up, you shouldn't beat that person. That's why I'm saying the security officers are trained that even when they are carrying guns, they should know when to use guns and when not. I am sure you know that the law allows security officers, particularly police and even the army, that in some circumstances they can use force, they can use firearms. When you look at the Police Act, Section 28, there are provisions where a security officer is allowed to use firearms when controlling a riot. For instance, if it is the self-defense or if you resist